The morning of October 15th unfolded with that calm, almost leisurely beauty characteristic of a southern autumn. The sun, not yet aggressive, softly broke through a thin haze of clouds over Charlotte, North Carolina, bathing the streets in a muted yet warm golden light. The air was filled with a crisp freshness, promising a day free from the weariness of yesterday. The scent of fallen leaves, damp earth, and, faintly, the last chrysanthemums created a sense of peaceful serenity. In the small yet incredibly cozy apartment of the Miller family, located on the outskirts of the city, the usual morning bustle reigned. The clatter of dishes, the quiet murmur of the radio from the kitchen, the rustle of newspaper pages, all intertwined into the familiar symphony of a new day. Sarah Miller, her face still bearing traces of morning fatigue, but her eyes, deep and kind, radiating tenderness, was finishing breakfast. Her husband, Tom, an engineer at a local plant, was likely already at work. His shift started early. "Mommy, are we going to the park with Buddy today?" rang out the bright, impatient voice of 5-year-old Lily, their only daughter. Lily, the true sunshine of the family, sat at the kitchen table. Her face, framed by 2 neat pigtails, was smeared with oatmeal, and her blue eyes, as clear as the morning sky, looked up at her mother with hope. Beside her chair, a large, fluffy golden cloud lay on the floor, Buddy, their beloved golden retriever. His shiny coat shimmered golden in the morning light, and his intelligent brown eyes gazed at Lily with adoration. Buddy wasn't just a dog to them, he was a full member of the family, an integral part of their lives. They had adopted him from a local shelter just over a year ago, after their previous beloved pet, an old spaniel, had crossed the Rainbow Bridge, leaving a void in their hearts. Buddy had filled that void. He was a big but incredibly gentle dog with a soul full of boundless kindness. An unspoken, unbreakable bond had formed between him and Lily from the very first days. Where Lily was, Buddy was too. He patiently allowed her to braid ribbons into his fluffy fur, to ride on his back like a soft, friendly horse, and even to read him picture books, pointing them out with his paw. His eyes always radiated unconditional loyalty and a deep, all-encompassing love.
"Of course, sweetie, but a little later," Sarah smiled, placing a plate of hot, golden pancakes, Lily's favorite, on the table. "First, we need to drive to Grandma and Grandpa's. Remember, we promised to take them those medicines Daddy bought?" Lily nodded. Her face, moments ago downcast about the postponed walk, immediately lit up. She adored her grandparents, who lived in a small, picturesque town just outside the city. A trip to their place was always a real treat for her. They had a big apple orchard, a cool river where she could skip rocks, and complete freedom for her childhood games. "And Buddy's coming with us?" she asked, looking at the dog, who, sensing the upcoming trip, had already begun to wag his tail joyfully, his fluffy plume rhythmically thumping the floor. Sarah gently stroked the dog's head, feeling his warm, soft fur under her palm. "Of course he's coming. How could we leave our protector at home?" Within half an hour, they were fully ready for the trip. Sarah, out of habit, checked all the doors and windows and turned off the gas on the stove. In the trunk of their old but reliable sedan, which Tom meticulously maintained in excellent condition, she placed a bag with medicines for her parents, a small backpack with Lily's favorite toys, and, of course, a bowl and a bottle of water for Buddy. Buddy, as always, eagerly jumped into the back seat, settling into his usual spot at Lily's feet, who was already securely buckled into her child car seat. Her childish songs, sung in a thin yet clear voice, filled the car's interior, creating an atmosphere of lightness and carefree joy. The road to the town was familiar, known down to every detail. Sarah knew every turn, every pothole. But this time, despite the sunny morning, she felt a strange, barely noticeable but persistent unease. She tried to attribute it to ordinary fatigue and worry about her parents' health. Perhaps it was just a premonition of autumnal melancholy. Meanwhile, the sky gradually began to be covered by heavy, leaden clouds, and the first drops of autumn rain started to patter softly on the windshield. Ahead lay a section of the road that wound through a small but dense forest, a narrow, winding stretch where visibility was limited and the turns were blind.
"Buddy, look! I can draw a sun!" A joyful exclamation from Lily came from the back seat. She was showing the dog her new drawing, made with colorful markers. Buddy quietly barked in response, gently nudging her small, childlike hand holding the bright paper. Their little idyll in the car was so complete, so fragile. This idyllic moment was abruptly shattered, suddenly, sharply, frenetically. From around the blind curve, like a phantom from hell, an old, rusty semi-truck sped towards them at a furious, unacceptable speed. Its headlights cut through the gray air, and its engine roared like a wounded beast gone mad. It had clearly lost control. The huge metal behemoth swayed from side to side, occupying almost the entire narrow lane. Sarah's instincts as a driver, honed by years behind the wheel, kicked in instantly. She slammed on the brakes, pushing down hard until her leg ached, feeling the tires screech as they desperately gripped the wet asphalt. Simultaneously, she wrenched the steering wheel to its limit, directing the car towards the shoulder, hoping to avoid a head-on collision that would undoubtedly be fatal. But there was catastrophically little time. The rainy haze, the truck's speed, and her own maneuver all merged into one fatal second. The truck bore down on them, leaving no chance of escape. Sarah's last thought, searing through her consciousness, was of Lily. She heard only her terrified, tiny shriek dissolving into the air, and a dull, deafening impact that made the whole world tilt. And then only darkness, pain, and the unbearable metallic screech of tearing metal. The impact wasn't just strong, it was devastating, brutal, absolute. The old yet reliable sedan crumpled like a paper toy under the weight of the multi-ton, out-of-control truck. Metal bent, cracked, and tore with a deafening, inhuman scream. Everything around them transformed into a chaotic mess of mangled iron, shattered glass, and ripped wires. Sarah felt a sharp, piercing pain that spread throughout her entire body, as if she had been impaled by 1,000 needles at once. Then came emptiness. Consciousness flickered, then vanished, then returned in fragments, like a broken strobe light, throwing bits of reality onto the black screen of agony. She heard the metallic screeching echoing in her ears, the chime of shattering glass falling like rain, distant cries, and the unbearable, suffocating smell of fuel mixing with the scent of blood and dampness. Her head throbbed excruciatingly, as if splitting in two, and her left arm was trapped somewhere deep beneath the twisted dashboard, as if in a vice. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. It felt heavy, as if filled with lead, every movement triggering a new wave of agony. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible, terrified and weak. She tried to reach for the back seat, where just moments ago her little daughter had sat, but her arm couldn't overcome the pain and the obstructions. Panic, cold and sticky, clutched at her heart. The most important thing was for Lily to be alive, for her to be safe. Buddy, she remembered the dog, his warm body that was always near her daughter. Was he alive? Had he escaped this hell? Something hummed above her head. It was the truck's engine, still running, spewing thick, black, acrid smoke that burned her eyes and throat. The truck's cab was mangled beyond recognition, but she couldn't see what was there. The rain intensified, turning the wrecked road and shoulder into a muddy, slippery mess. cold seeped into the car through the broken windows, amplifying the feeling of helplessness. Buddy's barks grew louder and louder, as if he understood that this was their only chance for salvation. He ran around the interior, then again squeezed towards the back seat, whimpering, trying to pull Lily out, but to no avail. Then she heard him whimper again, but differently. It was a short, decisive whimper, and then a rustle and the sound of broken, already damaged glass, which he seemed to have completely shattered, slipping outside. He had gotten out of the car. Sarah lost consciousness again. Darkness enveloped her, leaving only the echo of pain and anxiety. She didn't know what would happen next, if they would get help, or if this forest would become their final resting place. Buddy, having escaped the mangled car, felt a sharp, piercing pain in his right front paw. It was clearly injured. Blood dripped copiously, leaving dark stains on the wet ground. But the dog paid no mind to the pain. His instinct, his single, all-consuming desire, was to save Lily. He circled the wrecked car, trying to find any access to the back seat, where just moments ago he had heard her voice. But the door was jammed shut, and the remains of the windows were cluttered with shattered glass and metal shards. He tried to squeeze back into the cabin through the broken windshield, scratching at something, attempting to reach the child, but the car was so mangled that getting to her, to Lily, was impossible. The little girl, though securely fastened in her child seat, was trapped between the crumpled seats and the deformed car frame. She was unconscious. Her small, pale face disappeared beneath piles of metal. Buddy, unable to reach his little friend, understood. He had to go for help. His large, intelligent eyes looked at Sarah's lifeless body, slumped in the front seat, her head oddly twisted, her face streaked with blood. Then at the trapped, silent Lily, who had disappeared in the wreckage. He cast one last, desperate look at the mangled, smoking car from which the scent of fuel emanated, and, gathering his last ounce of strength, he bolted into the forest. He ran. Through thickets, over the wet, rain-slicked ground, ignoring the sharp branches that scratched his fluffy fur, ignoring the pain in his injured paw that pulsed with every stride. He ran blindly, guided by only one instinct, to find people. He barked. His barks echoed through the forest, at first frantic and desperate, then growing more demanding, piercing, almost human in their persistence. He knew that people wouldn't ignore such barking, that they would understand. Someone needed help. Someone was in trouble. He ran until he felt his lungs burn from the exertion, and a throbbing, unbearable pain shot through his injured paw, radiating throughout his entire body. He heard something crunch under his paw with every step, but he continued to run, as if his life depended on it. It felt like he ran for an eternity. Dark, wet trees surrounded him on all sides, like the walls of a vast, endless labyrinth. He didn't know where he was running, but he didn't stop. The image of Lily, her small, pale face, her silent body, disappearing into the wreckage, it stood before his eyes, driving him forward. Suddenly, through the sound of the rain and his own ragged breathing, he heard a noise. Not the sound of the forest, not the rustle of wind in the branches, but something else, something that was hope. The sound of an engine. He gathered his last strength, bolting towards the sound like a hunter towards prey. He burst onto a small dirt road where, to his incredible luck, an old pickup truck was driving by. Behind the wheel sat a middle-aged man, his face weathered, his hands calloused. It was Frank, a local fisherman, returning home after a quiet, if unsuccessful, day on the lake. Buddy darted out directly in front of the truck. He barked, jumped, his body trembling with tension, his tail wagging frantically. Then he darted back into the woods, stopping and looking back, as if inviting the fisherman to follow him. His fur was disheveled, matted with branches and mud, his eyes desperate, and blood was visible on his paw, dripping onto his golden fur.
The fisherman, Frank, was not just surprised, he was stunned. He had never seen a dog in such a state, with such frantic, almost human anxiety in its eyes. He understood. Something had happened. The dog was clearly calling for help, and it was extremely urgent. His instinct, his humanity, kicked in.
Immediately, he turned off the engine and got out of the truck, despite the intensifying rain. "What happened, boy? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. Buddy, without waiting for an answer, bolted back into the woods, barking and looking back, his gaze radiating impatience. Frank hesitated for only a moment. It was irrational, but something in the dog's eyes, in his desperation, made him believe. He knew he had to follow this dog. He followed Buddy. The dog ran ahead, stopping occasionally to make sure Frank was still following. They pushed through dense undergrowth, slipped on the wet ground, descended into a small ravine, overcoming obstacles until finally they emerged into a small clearing from which, through the sheet of rain, the wrecked road was visible. What Frank saw made his heart seize up and drop into his stomach. 2 cars utterly demolished, like toys crushed by giants. Smoke, thick and black, billowed from the wreckage, mixing with the rain. He immediately understood that this was a terrible, serious accident. He rushed forward, pulling his old phone from his pocket to call emergency services as quickly as possible. Buddy, seeing the smoking car, began to whimper desperately and scratch at it, pointing to the back seat. He remembered where Lily was, where her small body was waiting for help. He hadn't forgotten. Frank, shocked and overwhelmed by what he saw, quickly dialed 911, calling for an ambulance and then for rescue services. His voice, though trembling, was surprisingly calm as he clearly described the scene and the extent of the disaster. Buddy, oblivious to his words, continued to scratch at the car, his whimpers unbearable, filled with panic and pain. Approaching the mangled sedan, Frank felt his lungs fill with the acrid smell of gasoline and burning plastic. The front seat was crumpled like crumpled paper, and the woman at the wheel, Sarah, was unconscious, her face pale, her hair matted with blood and rain. He quickly checked her pulse, faint, barely perceptible, but there. This gave him a tiny spark of hope. Then he turned his attention to the back seat. Buddy desperately pointed his nose at the child car seat, his body trembling and blood still dripping from his injured paw. Frank peered into the cabin through the broken glass and saw little Lily. She was in the seat, but the seat was severely deformed, and the seat belts were jammed in the metal wreckage. The little girl was pale, almost lifeless, her tiny chest barely moving. She was trapped, as if in a cage, and any movement of the car, which could ignite at any moment, could be her last. "Little girl, sweetie." Frank tried to reach her, but the metal was mangled, its sharp edges sticking out like a predator's teeth, and reaching the child was almost impossible. He tried to open the door, but it was jammed shut, as if welded. Buddy, seeing his attempts, began to bark even louder. His barks were now not just a plea, but a command, as if urging Frank on. Frank looked around. He was alone in the middle of this forest. Help would not arrive quickly, and the little girl could die from internal injuries, from hypothermia, or the car could ignite at any moment. He saw thick, black smoke beginning to seep from under the truck's hood, and the smell of fuel intensified, becoming increasingly sharp and dangerous. The situation was critical. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a tow rope in the trunk of his pickup truck. Perhaps he could pull the crumpled door open, creating some space. It was their only chance. He rushed to his truck, quickly retrieved the strong metal rope, his hands trembling, but he acted decisively. He securely attached the rope to the mangled door of the sedan and to his pickup truck. "Back, boy, back!" he yelled at Buddy, who stood too close, his eyes never leaving Lily. Buddy, understanding the urgency of the moment, backed away,
but his gaze, full of tension, never left the car that was about to ignite. Frank started the pickup truck and slowly moved forward, feeling the rope tighten to its limit. The metal groaned, screeched, and bent with an inhuman sound, but the door yielded. With every inch it moved, precious space appeared. Finally, with a loud metallic groan that ripped through the forest silence, the door bent open, providing access to Lily. Frank quickly turned off the truck and rushed to the sedan. He carefully, with incredible tenderness, unbuckled the seatbelts, trying not to cause the child any further harm. Lily was unconscious, her small face pale, but her chest, barely, almost imperceptibly, moved. She was saved. Buddy, seeing that the little girl was safe, whimpered softly, his body relaxing, and he carefully touched her face with his nose, as if checking if she was breathing. He licked her pale cheek, his eyes filled with immense relief. Then he looked at Frank, his gaze radiating deep, unconditional gratitude. It was a look that spoke more than 1,000 words. Frank carefully carried Lily out of the car and laid her on the grass away from the smoking vehicle, which now truly threatened to ignite. He quickly examined her. She was covered in scrapes and bruises, her clothes torn, but there were no visible, serious, life-threatening injuries. She had miraculously survived. At that moment, he heard sirens, at first barely audible, then growing louder. The ambulance and rescue services were already close. They arrived quickly, their faces grim as they assessed the scale of the catastrophe. The rescuers immediately rushed to free Sarah from the mangled car, their tools roaring as they cut through the metal. Medics, meanwhile, were already providing first aid to Lily and Sarah. The truck driver, it turned out, had died on impact. His cab was crushed beyond recognition. Frank, still in shock, but with incredible pride, told the rescuers and medics about Buddy, about how the dog had led him to the accident site, about his incredible loyalty. They were astonished. "That's incredible, a true hero," said one of the medics, his voice filled with awe, as he gently stroked Buddy's head. The dog, despite the pain in his injured paw, stood next to Lily, never leaving her side, his eyes never leaving her small body as the medics carefully transferred her to a stretcher. "We need to examine the dog, too," said another medic, noticing his injured paw, from which blood was still dripping. "He needs help, too. He saved lives." Buddy was taken to the nearest veterinary clinic. His right front paw was broken, but it was a small price to pay for 2 lives saved. He had experienced severe shock, his body trembling, but he was alive and relatively unharmed. His loyalty, his instinct, his desperate cry for help had saved Lily. Sarah and Lily were rushed to the hospital. Sarah sustained multiple fractures, a concussion, and deep lacerations from the shattered glass, but her life was out of danger. She was conscious, but pain and shock prevented her from thinking clearly. Lily had several bruises, a mild concussion, and was very shaken, but miraculously, she didn't sustain serious injuries. Her child car seat, though deformed, had saved her life by absorbing the main impact. But most of all, Buddy had saved her. The days in the hospital for Sarah stretched endlessly, hazy like a fog. She was submerged in a blanket of pain and medication that dulled her consciousness. But through that fog, one paramount question persistently broke through, which she repeated every time she woke up. "Lily, Buddy." News of the accident spread like wildfire. Tom, her husband, rushed to the hospital, his face pale with terror. Sarah's parents, upon learning of the tragedy, dropped everything and came. When they found out that their little Lily had been saved not just by any dog, but by their own Buddy, it triggered an incredible, overwhelming wave of emotions, from tears of sorrow for what they had endured to boundless, all-encompassing gratitude. When Sarah was allowed to speak, her mind cleared. Doctors, and then Tom, told her in detail about Buddy's heroic act. about how he, injured, made his way through the forest, how he found Frank and led him to the accident site. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. She had always known Buddy was special, but what he had done surpassed all wildest expectations. He wasn't just a dog. He was her guardian angel, their savior, sent from above. Lily recovered faster. Children are amazing in their ability to heal. Their bodies and souls mend quickly. She quickly regained consciousness, but was still terrified by the ordeal and incredibly missed Buddy. Doctors, considering the psychological aspect, allowed visitors. And Buddy, of course, was the first to come to her room. His paw was in a cast, and there were visible scrapes on his head, but he, limping, still rushed to the little girl, his tail wagging happily.
When Lily saw Buddy, her face, still pale from fright, lit up with such pure, childlike joy that it even made the stern doctors smile. She hugged him as tightly as she could, her small hands gripping his fluffy fur, whispering words of thanks into his ear that only they both understood. The dog, in response, gently licked her face, his tail wagging happily, almost knocking his cast off. It was a moment filled with pure, unconditional, boundless love that healed the soul. The story of Buddy's heroic rescue quickly made local news, and then it was picked up by national television channels. Journalists from across the country and then from abroad came to the hospital to interview Sarah and Frank, who had been the witness and, most importantly, the first rescuer. Buddy's story circled the entire country and then the world, astounding people with its incredible nature. He became not just a beloved pet, he became a national hero, a symbol of loyalty, unconditional love, and the self-sacrifice of animals. People from all corners of the world sent letters of support, offered financial help for Buddy's treatment, and asked to know more about this amazing dog. Several weeks later, after a long course of rehabilitation, Sarah and Lily, though still bearing their wounds, but with hope in their hearts, returned home. Buddy was home too. His cast had already been removed, and he was gradually recovering, his limp diminishing with each passing day. Life slowly, cautiously returned to normal, but it was never truly the same. The accident left a deep scar on their family, but it also showed them the power of unconditional love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of every single moment lived. Lily's relationship with Buddy became even stronger than ever. She didn't leave his side, as if afraid he would disappear, that it had all been just a terrible dream. Buddy, in turn, never denied her attention, continuing to be her shadow protector, her soft, warm pillow, and her faithful companion. Tom, Sarah's husband, was immensely grateful to Buddy. His love for the dog transformed into deep, respectful gratitude. He personally, with special care, made a special, very comfortable bed for the dog, spoiled him with the tastiest treats, and took him for walks in the park every day, proudly telling everyone who asked about his incredible feat. The Miller family began actively supporting the local animal shelter where they had adopted Buddy. They organized fundraisers, helped with animal care, telling their story as a living example that every animal deserves a home and love. Their story, which became a symbol of hope, inspired many people who subsequently decided to adopt a pet from the shelter, giving them a second chance at a happy life. Frank, the fisherman who helped save Lily, became part of their extended family. He often came to visit them, and they always welcomed him warmly, like a relative. He was Buddy's godfather, as they called him, and proudly told everyone about the incredible canine feat he had witnessed firsthand. Time flowed ceaselessly. Lily grew, transforming from a little girl into a lively teenager, and then into a young woman. The scar on Sarah's face, a remnant of the accident, gradually faded, becoming a barely noticeable line, but it still served as a reminder of that terrible day.
The scar on Buddy's paw also became less prominent, blending with his golden fur, but it always remained there, a testament to his heroism, to the pain he endured, and to the lives he saved. Every year on October 15th, the Miller family gathered together. It was the day they remembered the accident, how their world had nearly shattered into pieces, and how Buddy had saved their most precious possession, their Lily. They visited the accident site, now marked by a small memorial plaque. There, they left flowers, honoring the memory of the truck driver who had died, and thanked fate for a second chance, for the miracle, for the lives they had been given. Lily, now a student at a veterinary university, dreaming of becoming a veterinary surgeon and dedicating her life to animals, always brought Buddy with her. He was her best friend, her protector, her silent reminder that miracles happen and that love can save lives. She told his story to all her friends, convincing them that animals are not just pets, but beings with enormous hearts, capable of incredible acts of unconditional loyalty.
Buddy lived to a ripe old age. His golden fur had grayed around his muzzle, his movements had slowed, but he always remained kind, gentle, his eyes retaining that same wisdom and boundless devotion. He was a living symbol of their ordeal and their triumph. When he crossed the Rainbow Bridge, the Miller family felt an unspeakable pain, as if they had lost a part of themselves, but also immense gratitude. They knew he would always be with them, in their hearts, in every memory of that autumn day when he, a true hero, saved their little girl. Buddy's story, the story of their golden rescuer, was passed down from generation to generation in their family. It became part of their identity, a reminder of the preciousness of every breath, of the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, and of the fact that even in the most terrifying, most hopeless moment, a spark of hope can ignite, saving everything. This story was a scar on their hearts, but it was a scar that reminded them not of pain, but of boundless love, courage, and the miracle of rescue that changed their lives forever. Lily, as a successful veterinary surgeon, faced animals in need of help every day. Each time she saved another life, she remembered Buddy. His example became for her not just a memory, but a true guiding light in life. She created a charity foundation, Buddy's Heart, which raised funds to help animals from shelters, to pay for their treatment, and to find them new families. Her story, the story of Buddy, resonated at every foundation event, inspiring thousands of people to open their hearts to four-legged friends. Sarah and Tom, looking at their daughter, were proud of her. They saw how the tragedy that had almost torn their family apart had transformed into a source of strength, compassion, and a great mission. Every time they saw a new, happy family adopting a dog from a shelter, they knew that a part of Buddy lived on in these new stories of love and rescue. Their home was always filled with warmth and love, and there was always room for a new four-legged friend, because they knew that the greatest lesson Buddy had taught them was unconditional love, which knows no bounds and is capable of creating true miracles.